Earlier this year, some folks at church recommended a movie to me called Nyad. Anybody here see it? A couple people, including the people who recommended it to me. Beautiful. It stars Annette Bening and Jodie Foster. It was up for some awards this season. It's a true story about the swimmer Diana Nyad. Does anyone know her story? Maybe you didn't see the movie, but you've heard of her? Okay. Nyad was a long-distance swimmer. In 1975, she swam around Manhattan, so 28 miles. And in 1979, she swam from the Bahamas to Florida, which was 102 miles. These are unassisted swims. So she's not like getting onto a boat halfway through and taking a 10-hour nap and getting back in. No touching anything. She could tread water for a minute to like eat some nutrients and drink, but then she had to keep swimming and swimming. Nobody could touch her. Some of those swims took well over 24 hours. During that same period of her life, in her 20s, she attempted a swim from Cuba to Florida. A shark-infested, jellyfish-filled, storm-prone stretch of the ocean. She did not make it. And then once she was in her 30s, she stopped marathon swimming and retired. But then, and this is where the movie starts, in her 60s, she decides to try that particular swim again. Now, one could guess that if I'm bringing up this movie in a sermon, it might be to highlight the try again nature of Nyad's work ethic. It takes her 4 tries to swim across this stretch of sea from Cuba to Florida. 4 times. And each time she learns something new, she tries again, a little bit better outfitted than the time before. It would make for a great never give up sort of sermon. And trust me, if most of us faced what she faced, we would give up. But that's not why I'm talking about the movie. One might also guess that I would bring up Nyad because she's old, right? She's a 60-year-old. 60-year-old women don't swim for 110 miles in treacherous waters. And then I might say something about God calls surprising people, like we talked about last week. Did younger people finish the swim? No. Did anyone else do it unassisted? No. Only people who like swam in a shark tank and had various different types of help. Diana Nyad was the first to do it. How surprising! But that's not my sermon today either. I'm talking about this movie because you can tell in the first 5 minutes that Diana Nyad is super passionate about completing this swim. She 100% views this swim as her life's calling. And she's kind of a jerk. You could say that she's a woman on a mission. She's pushy. And not in the way that sometimes we say women are pushy, but we wouldn't label a man who is trying. No, she's mean. Throughout the whole movie, Diana has this great way of including people into the journey of her swim. She asks her best friend Bonnie to be her coach. They research all these possibilities. They find sponsors, people who give tens of thousands of dollars. This is not a cheap adventure. They find people to volunteer to kayak alongside her to repel the sharks. They did it with sound emission would send the sharks away. But if that failed, they had sticks with tennis balls on the end so they could bop the sharks and then they would go away because you don't want to kill the sharks. Really safe. Anyway, Diana convinces all of these people about the epicness of her swim, and she uses that term again and again and again. My swim. This is my swim. And they agree to help her. Experts in their fields, a PhD scientist who spent her life's work on the particular type of jellyfish that swim in these waters, the jellyfish that on an earlier try forced Diana to stop one of her attempts. So So this scientist agrees to come, and she gives her this whole specialized suit, and she's on board of the boat that's going alongside her for consultation in case something happens. Diana gets doctors and nurses, a captain who knows the waters better than anyone else, and he has to steer the boat so that her swimming path is going in the right direction. Diana finds all of these people, and she is not nice to them. She is solely focused on her and her swim, which, to be fair, she would kind of have to be, but she never listens to their advice. She wants to go swimming, even when the weather is going to be bad. She wants to swim when she needs medical attention. At one point, she almost dies, and she wakes up in the hospital, and she is mad that people helped her and pulled her out of the water. She knows what her calling is to make this epic swim from Cuba to Florida. She knows that she needs the people around her and their skills, but she views the swim as a solo journey. As the movie enters its final stretch, Diana is trying one more time. She changes her behavior. She begins to act more like a teammate. She takes some guidance. She says, "No, that'll be your call." She finds her place in relation to the whole team, who all want her to make the swim, but who want to work together and be respected. When Diana trusts the jellyfish expert and the boat captain and the doctors and her coach, that's when Naiad finishes the swim. When she figures out who she is in relationship to the bigger picture, the family of supporters she has, that's when things work best, and that's when the swim matters the most. Today's 3 vignettes of scriptures are about Moses and the Israelites beginning to figure out who they are, what they are called to, and it's the very beginning of their learning that who they are and what they are called to works best and matters most when they are in relationship with God. We're going to talk about Moses first. Now, kind of like Jesus, we don't know much about Moses' upbringing after the story of his birth. There's this big window of time where we don't hear anything, and we don't know, was he really welcomed into Egyptian society? Was he there but kind of an outcast? We're not sure. What we do know when this scripture starts is that Moses already knows he is one of the Hebrew people. They are his kinsfolk. There is no scandalous moment where he learns the truth and has a dramatic run through the Egyptian city to, right? Okay? Perhaps he knew all along. He did have his actual mother raise him for several years. Either way, though, he sees the forced labor of the Hebrew people, and while other people in Egyptian society may have seen the beautiful cities or a forced peace, stability, opulence, a beautiful town, Moses goes out and sees oppression. Moses, right from the very beginning, has a heart for social justice. Every book that you're going to read from theologians about Moses is going to be like, Moses is the original social justice person. If you're like, that's who he is. And this forced labor that he sees obviously affects him very deeply, because when he sees a Hebrew man being beaten, Moses does the same thing to the Egyptian. In the original Hebrew language, it's the same verb. The Egyptian was killing the Hebrew, and Moses killed the Egyptian. In English, we read the Egyptian was beating the Hebrew and Moses killed, but it's the same word in Hebrew. Now, while I was studying and writing this sermon, I wrestled big time with this section. Nowhere in the Bible does it explicitly say that Moses murdering this person is wrong, even though I really wanted to say that. However, considering the bigger picture of how Moses develops and what God eventually teaches Moses and eventually teaches the Israelites and eventually teaches the millennia of faithful believers who come and follow this story, I feel like it's safe to say that Moses killing the Egyptian, even if the Egyptian was a bad person, is not the ideal outcome of their interaction. Moses has a calling for social justice, yes, but how he expresses it, so far, not great. It's the same vignette now, but it's the next day. Moses is trying to help settle another social justice issue by intervening when two Israelite people are arguing with each other. This conversation also does not end very well. One of the men shouts at Moses, and this is how I loosely translate it, "Who died and put you in charge? Mind your own business." And then subtly lets Moses know that his secret of killing the Egyptian is out in the open. Moses knows that he wants to help people. He knows what his calling is. He's solely focused on it, but it's not going great. He gets pulled out of the water the first time. Which brings us to the second vignette. Moses escapes Egypt, and now he's in Midian. And when he's in Midian, he's lost any power that he might have had in Egypt. Moses is no longer the adopted grandson of the Pharaoh. The sisters at the well look at him and think he's an Egyptian, so that's an interesting thing to note. But he's a stranger, an alien in a foreign land. But he's still Moses. He had his rocky start, but his heart is still full of social justice. It's what drives him. It's what he's focusing on. He still feels the call to help others, and he does that at a local well when he sees the 7 sisters. The English again says that Moses defends the sisters when a group of shepherds appear, but the Hebrew word is bolder. It says that Moses saves them. You can imagine the various things that Moses prevented from happening to the sisters. So while this instance of Moses saving others goes perhaps better than the interactions in Egypt, he has learned a few things, right, from the first swim. He came a little more prepared. Moses is nonetheless left alone in the desert until the father of the sisters, the priest of Midian, intervenes and invites him into their home. It certainly was an act of gratitude for what Moses did for the sisters, but it's also that man saving Moses' life. There is no doubt that Moses has a heart for people, that Moses' love language is social justice, and that he's trying to figure out how to make justice happen in whatever environment he's in. But we can also see that Moses working on his own isn't smooth swimming or smooth sailing. If he was swimming from Cuba to Florida, he would need to be pulled out of the water again, which is okay. Sometimes it takes more than one try. Like I said earlier, Moses is just starting to learn who he is and that what he's called to matters most and works best when he's in relationship with God. And the last vignette, those last 3 verses, we see that same beginning of exploration for the Israelite people. Time has passed. Moses has been married, has a son. Who knows, 10 years, 15 years, 5 years, we can't be sure, 20 years. And the Egyptian king, the Pharaoh, has died. And this is where the Israelite people start to find their voice. They groan and they cry, which is something to note because up until this point, they have been so afraid that they have been silent. But now they are speaking up for themselves. They are groaning with despair and grief. They are becoming a people who are not afraid to say, "We are in pain. We need help. We deserve better." They are looking for a change. And what we know, but they don't know yet, is that their lives will be better and mean more when they are in relationship with God. Friends, we are nowhere near the end of the story of Exodus. And I know I mentioned the end of Diana Nyad's story, that she makes it to Florida. She finds her connection with her greater team, and that is what makes it happen. But it's going to be a long summer before we get to that part of the story for Moses and the Israelites. There will be many failed attempts at the swim before everyone is working together as a team, before they realize that they need to change how they are acting and work with God instead of just on their own. However, and this is good news, here at the beginning of the story, even as the Israelites and Moses just begin to sense who they are, even as they make mistakes and when they are in pain and even in their darkest hour and crying out, even here, God is ready to be in relationship. Listen to the 4 verbs that describe God at the end of the passage. God hears their groaning. God remembers the covenant. God looks upon the Israelites. God sees them. And the last one in English reads, God took notice of them. But in the Hebrew, all that sentence says is, God knows. God hears, remembers, sees, and knows. No matter what, even when we make mistakes and when we are figuring out who we are and what we're called to do, and when we think we can make our journey on our own, or when we focus on something so intently that we miss the important things around us, even then, God is ready. God is ready to be in relationship and partner with us. From the very start of whatever life journey we're on, God is the team of experts who is ready to help us on our way. God is there for the crazy long distance swimming that we are doing with the jellyfish masks and the sticks with tennis balls. God is the expert captain, navigator, and doctor, and the coach who is cheering us along the whole time. And when we see that who we are and what we're called to do works best and matters most when we are in relationship with God and not on our own, everything changes for the better. We can finish the 110-mile swim. We can free oppressed people. We can stand up for ourselves to bring about good and right change. But I know I'm jumping ahead. So hear this for today. No matter what, even at the start of your journey, God hears us, God remembers us, God sees us and knows us. God is with you. Amen.